My name is Anna, I am 26 years old, and my father was lying unconscious in a hospital bed when my family decided I hadn't been there enough. The room was quiet in a strange way, not silent, just filled with the steady beeping of machines that did not care who was watching. My father's eyes were closed. His mouth was slightly open. A thin blanket covered him up to the chest. I stood next to the bed holding a folder against my stomach. A folder, not flowers, not a jacket. Inside were insurance forms, consent papers, copies of his ID, and notes I had written down because the doctor talked fast, and I was afraid I would forget something important. I had been there since early morning. Then my family walked in. My mom went straight to the bed and grabbed my father's hand. My brother stood near the wall. My aunt sighed like the room itself was exhausting her. No one looked at me. No one asked how long I had been there. After a minute, my mom turned around. "You really should have been here more," she said. Not angry, not loud, just certain. I blinked. "I am here." She shook her head. "You're always in and out. You disappear. Disappear." I looked down at the folder in my hands. The corners were bent. The papers inside were wrinkled from being opened again and again. If this was disappearing, I did not know what being present was supposed to look like. My brother crossed his arms. "We barely see you at the hospital." I did not argue, because 3 days earlier, when my father collapsed, I was the one who got the call. Not my brother, not my aunt. Me. I was the one who rushed over. I was the one who stood at the front desk answering questions. I was the one who heard the word surgery and nodded even though my hands were shaking. I was the one who signed the first form. Now, standing in the same room, I was apparently the one who didn't care enough. A nurse walked in holding a tablet. "Who's the primary contact for your father?" she asked. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at each other. Then they looked at me. "I am," I said. The nurse nodded. "Okay. The doctor will come speak with you shortly." "Not everyone. You." She left. My mom sighed. "Well, you could at least explain what's going on." I stared at her. I had explained. I had texted. I had updated. But they didn't want information. They wanted a reason to feel better about not doing the hard parts. I looked back at my father's face. Still asleep. Still unaware that his illness had turned into an argument about me. Standing there, holding the paperwork no one else wanted to touch, something shifted in my head. They didn't need me sitting at the bed. They needed me handling everything quietly. And when it got uncomfortable, they needed me to be the problem. If you were standing next to your father's hospital bed, holding his care in your hands, and your family told you that you hadn't been there enough, would you explain yourself? Or would you start paying attention to what was really happening? They kept saying it like it was obvious. "You're not around enough. You're never here when we come. You always leave early." I nodded because arguing would only make it worse. But in my head, I started counting. Not hours, not visits, tasks. Because not being there, to them, meant I wasn't sitting by the bed long enough for them to see me. It didn't mean the things I actually did. I was the one who checked in at the front desk every morning. Same woman, same badge, same tired smile. "Still you?" she asked once, half joking. "Yes," I said. "Always me." I was the one who learned which elevator was faster, which nurse worked nights, which doctor explained things clearly and which one rushed. I learned how to read lab results without panicking. I learned how to ask questions without sounding emotional. I learned how to say my father's full name slowly so they wouldn't mix him up with someone else. None of that happened at the bedside, so none of it counted. My brother came in after work, stayed 20 minutes, then left. "I can't stand hospitals," he said. "My aunt visited on weekends. This place gives me anxiety," she explained. My mom stayed longer, but only when someone else was around. When nurses came in, when relatives visited, when there was an audience. She cried loudly, held his hand, said things like, "He's a fighter." People nodded. They comforted her. Then she left. And I stayed. One night, around 1 a.m., a nurse asked if someone could help move my father for a scan. My mom had already gone home. My brother didn't answer his phone, so I stood up. I held tubes out of the way. I followed the bed down a long hallway with flickering lights. I watched the doors close behind him. No one saw that. In the morning, my aunt said, "You weren't here last night." I didn't correct her. They thought being there meant suffering visibly, crying, praying, holding hands when it mattered to them. What they didn't want was responsibility, the paperwork, the decisions, the phone calls that didn't have clear answers. Those things were quiet, so they let me do them. On the fourth day, a doctor pulled me aside. "We need to talk about next steps," he said. He didn't look around for anyone else. He looked at me. He explained risks, options, possible outcomes. I nodded and wrote things down. When I walked back into the room, my mom asked, "So? What did he say?" I explained. She sighed. "You're so cold about it." Cold. I had been awake for almost 20 hours. That was when I understood it. They didn't want me absent. They wanted me invisible, doing everything quietly so they could show up later and look like they had been there all along. And if something went wrong, they already knew who to blame. If you were doing all the work no one wanted to do and still being told you weren't enough, would you try harder? Or would you start noticing who benefited from you staying silent? It did not happen all at once. No one said, "You're in charge now." It happened in small moments, quiet ones, the kind you only notice later. On the first day, they asked who should be listed as the contact. Everyone looked at their phones. "I'm at work," my brother said. "I get overwhelmed with this stuff," my mom said. "I'm not good with paperwork," my aunt added. I raised my hand without thinking. "I can do it." The woman at the desk nodded and typed my name. That was it. After that, every question came to me. Insurance needed clarification. The pharmacy needed approval. The billing office needed signatures. Each time, they asked the same thing. "Are you authorized?" Each time I said yes. No one argued. No one offered to switch. On the second night, a nurse called my phone at 2:17 a.m. "Your father's blood pressure dropped," she said. "We're stabilizing him." I sat up so fast my head spun. I asked questions. I wrote answers down. I said, "Okay," when she asked if they could adjust his medication. When the call ended, I stared at the wall for a long time. Then I texted the family group chat. "Update, doctor adjusted meds. He's stable for now." 3 people read it. No one replied. The next morning, my brother walked in with coffee. "Any news?" he asked casually. I repeated exactly what I had already sent. He nodded. "Good you're on top of this. On top of this." Like it was a hobby I chose. Later that day, a social worker came by. She asked questions gently. "Does your father have a medical proxy? Who makes decisions if he can't? Who's been handling everything so far?" I answered, "Every time." She wrote my name down. Again. When she left, my mom looked at me. "You didn't have to take all that on yourself," she said. I waited. She didn't offer to take it back. By the third day, the nurses knew me. They stopped explaining things slowly. They stopped asking if I understood. They assumed I did, because I always stayed, always listened, always signed. I started carrying my charger in my bag. I stopped taking my coat off, just in case. That afternoon, a doctor came in with a serious face. "We need to discuss a possible procedure," he said. He didn't ask if anyone else should be there. He closed the curtain and spoke directly to me. Risk percentages, recovery times, words that felt too big to fit in my head. "Do you consent?" he asked. My mouth went dry. I thought about calling my mom. I didn't. I said yes. When my family arrived later, my aunt asked, "Why didn't you wait for us?" I looked at her. "You weren't answering." She frowned. "Well, you could have tried harder." Tried harder. I nodded. I always nodded. That night, sitting alone in the hallway with the vending machines humming, it finally hit me. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't accidental. They had handed everything to me because it was easier. And as long as I kept carrying it, they never had to admit they'd stepped away. If you take responsibility quietly long enough, people stop seeing it as help. They start seeing it as your job. And once it's your job, They'll blame you if anything goes wrong. If you were in my place, would you keep holding everything together so no one else had to feel uncomfortable? Or would you start asking why it all landed on you in the first place? That was when the pattern became clear. They did not need me there. They needed me available. They called me when something needed to be done. Can you sign this? Can you ask the doctor? Can you stay tonight? I always said yes. But when people came into the room, relatives, visitors, friends from church, I stepped back. Because suddenly, I was in the way. My mom took the chair by the bed when others were watching. She held my father's hand. She whispered his name. She cried softly, just loud enough to be noticed. Someone brought her water. Someone rubbed her back. They told her how strong she was. I stood near the wall, still holding the folder. Once, a cousin asked, "Where's Anna? I haven't seen her much." My aunt answered before anyone else could. "She's busy, always running around." Busy, like I chose this. One afternoon, a nurse came in with a clipboard. "Who's staying overnight?" she asked. Everyone avoided eye contact. I stepped forward. "I am." The nurse nodded and wrote it down. No one thanked me. That night, my father's monitor alarm went off. Not loud, just enough to make your heart jump. A nurse rushed in. I followed. I stood there while they adjusted wires and numbers. I answered questions when they asked how long something had been happening. In the morning, my brother walked in and said, "You look tired." I nodded. "That's why you shouldn't try to do everything," he added. I stared at him. He said it like advice. The worst part was how easily they spoke for me. "She doesn't like hospitals. She prefers to handle things behind the scenes. She's not very emotional." They decided that for me, because it made everything easier. One day, a doctor came in while my family was there. He looked around the room. "I need to speak with the person handling care decisions," he said. Everyone turned toward me. At the same time, the doctor nodded. "Let's step outside." As we walked into the hallway, I felt eyes on my back. Not grateful ones, suspicious ones. When we came back, my mom asked, "What was that about?" I explained. She frowned. "Why didn't he talk to all of us?" I said nothing, because the answer was obvious. Later, my aunt pulled me aside. "You know," she said quietly, "people might think you don't care if you're always outside handling paperwork." I looked at her. Paperwork. That word again. As if it wasn't my father's life written in black ink. That was the moment something hardened in me. They wanted me useful. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me to absorb the stress so they could keep their image clean. And the moment it looked bad, they were ready to say I hadn't been there enough. If you do all the work in silence, people forget it's work. They only remember what they can see. If you were doing everything no one else wanted to do, and still being told you weren't enough, would you try to make yourself more visible? Or would you start asking why your absence mattered more than your effort? It happened in the afternoon. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, no tears. Just one sentence. My father had been moved to a different room. The hallway was longer. The light was worse. I was standing at the counter signing another form when my family walked in behind me. My mom looked around. "Where were you?" she asked. I turned. I was handling the transfer paperwork. She sighed, already tired. "You're never here when we need you." That was it. Not loud, not cruel, just final. I stood there with the pen still in my hand. The paper was warm from my palm. My name was already written at the bottom. Again, I waited for someone to say something else. No one did. My brother looked at his phone. My aunt crossed her arms. No one corrected her. I thought about the night I stayed while everyone went home, the calls I answered, the forms I signed. I thought about the chair I slept in, and I realized something quietly terrifying. They truly believed this version of the story. "If you really cared," my mom continued, "you'd be here more, sitting with him." I nodded, because if I spoke, I would say the wrong thing. I would say that I had been here the whole time, that I had been carrying everything, that I was tired, and I knew how that would end. They would say I was overreacting, so I said nothing. I finished signing the form. I handed it back to the clerk. I walked back into the room. My father was still unconscious. I stood next to the bed. No one moved. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see, just enough. I understood then that no amount of explaining would change this. They didn't want facts. They wanted a role. And mine was already decided. A nurse came in a few minutes later. She smiled at me. "Thanks for staying on top of everything," she said quietly. Just that. I nodded. That sentence did more damage than the accusation, because it proved I wasn't invisible. I was just invisible to the people who needed me to be. Standing there, next to my father's bed, I stopped trying to be seen. I started paying attention instead. If they could blame me this easily while I was doing everything, what would they say if something went wrong? If someone blamed you for not caring, while relying on you to hold everything together, would you keep absorbing it? Or would you start preparing for the moment the truth could no longer stay quiet? It happened without planning. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't decide to stand up for myself. The truth just came out on its own. A doctor came in late that evening. Different face. Same serious tone. "I need to discuss a change in treatment," he said, looking around the room. "Who's been handling the decisions?" Everyone paused. Then, like before, all eyes moved to me. The doctor nodded. "Let's step outside." My mom frowned. "Why can't you say it here?" He was already turning away. "I need to speak with the primary caregiver." Primary caregiver. No one corrected him. In the hallway, he explained everything. Complications, risks, choices that didn't feel like choices at all. He asked if I understood. I said yes. He asked if I agreed. I said yes. He asked if I had any questions. I asked the ones no one else wanted to hear the answers to. When we went back into the room, my family was waiting. My mom spoke first. "So, what did he say?" I explained. Slowly, clearly. I used the same words the doctor had used with me. Halfway through, my aunt interrupted. "I didn't know it was that serious." I looked at her. "You didn't ask," I said. The room went quiet. My brother shifted uncomfortably. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I kept my voice calm. "I did. In the group chat. In person. Every day." He opened his mouth, then closed it. My mom crossed her arms. "You always make it sound worse than it is." The doctor cleared his throat. "No," he said gently. "She's been very accurate. She's the reason we've been able to move quickly." He looked at me again. "You've been doing a good job." Good job. 2 words. Not dramatic, not emotional, but they landed hard. No one spoke. Not because they agreed, but because there was nothing left to argue with. The truth was no longer coming from me. It was coming from someone they respected. The doctor left. My mom looked at the floor. "I didn't realize you were doing all of this," she said quietly. I nodded, not because I forgave her, but because there was nothing else to say. In that moment, I understood something important. You can explain yourself 1,000 times and still not be believed. But when the truth shows up without you asking for it, people have no choice but to hear it. If the truth had to come from someone else to be real, what did that say about how much they were willing to see you? Nothing dramatic happened after that. No apologies, no big realization speech, no hugs, just silence. My family stayed in the room for a while. My mom sat in the chair, staring at the floor. My brother leaned against the wall, arms crossed. My aunt checked her phone. No one looked at me. No one said thank you. And that was when I knew this was as far as it would ever go. I finished the last bit of paperwork at the nurse's station, signed my name one more time, confirmed a phone number, nodded when they explained visiting hours again. The nurse smiled at me. "You've been doing everything right," she said. I nodded back. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. When I walked back into the room, my father was still asleep. I stood by the bed for a moment, not because anyone was watching, just because I wanted to. I adjusted the blanket slightly, checked the IV line. Then I stepped back. "I'm going to head out for a bit," I said. My mom looked up. "Already?" I nodded. "I'll be back later." She didn't argue. She didn't ask when. As I walked down the hallway, the lights felt softer somehow. The beeping faded behind me. For the first time since this started, I wasn't carrying anything in my hands. No folder, no papers, just myself. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, real. I stood there for a moment and realized something that made my chest feel strangely calm. I had been there, in every way that mattered. They just didn't want to see it. And that was okay, because I wasn't doing this to be seen. I was doing it because someone had to. If my family ever tells this story, they might say I wasn't around much. They might say I was distant, that I didn't show enough emotion. I'm done correcting them. Because the truth doesn't disappear just because people ignore it. It sits there, in signatures, in records, in the quiet moments no one else wants to remember. And if you were in my place, doing everything quietly, carrying everything alone, and still being told you weren't enough, would you keep explaining yourself? Or would you finally walk away knowing you were never the problem?